No warrior could control the wild dragon until one human used a single word, please. No handler in the entire Galactic Federation Academy had managed to tame the crimson dragon that shattered restraints and reputations alike until an unnoticed human stable boy did something none of them had thought to try. He simply asked, please. On the scorched training grounds of Draonos IV, heat shimmered off the reinforced stone, carrying the bitter smell of singed metal and failed attempts. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. The elite dragon stables of the Federation's top military academy stretched in precise rows, humming with containment fields and quiet danger. Near the far wall, a young human in a stained work jumpsuit dragged a broom across the dust, mostly invisible to everyone with a rank. Ethan Cole had been sweeping this same arena for months, his presence as unremarkable as the scuff marks he erased. Most days, the trainers barely noticed he existed. Today, they did not even glance his way. Their attention was riveted on the monster in the center pen. The creature at the heart of the chaos was a Draconos Imperialis, a legendary red-scaled dragon whose wings looked like torn midnight when they unfurled to their full 30-foot span. Chains as thick as Ethan's torso anchored the dragon to the floor, powered by a lattice of glowing energy fields. Even so, the beast fought the restraints with terrifying fury. Each violent twist of its body made the shock-dampened bolts shriek in protest. Master Trainer Zorrox, a towering centurion with four-corded arms and obsidian-black skin that reflected the arena lights, braced himself as the dragon's tail lashed out. The blow missed his head by a breath, rattling his personal shield and leaving a gouge in the impact barrier behind him. Three assistants in armored harnesses surged forward, shock prods crackling with energy as they tried to reassert control. "Hold formation!" Zorrox roared, his deep voice rolling across the arena like thunder. "This dragon will submit today, or I will surrender my rank to high command." From his usual shadowed corner, Ethan paused mid-sweep, fingers tightening around the broom handle. The big red dragon had arrived 3 standard weeks ago in a heavily guarded transport, tagged as the rarest and most dangerous asset the Academy had ever received. Since then, some of the most decorated trainers in the Federation had tried, and failed, to form a neural bond with it. The attempts usually ended with emergency medevac shuttles and a lot of broken walls. Ethan knew more about the creature than anyone suspected. He'd read every file he could access during stolen hours in the Academy library, studying dragon physiology and neural mapping when he was supposed to be resting. Officially, humans like him were just cheap labor here. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Federation for barely 27 years, discovered by a passing scout ship and promptly labeled physically mediocre and technologically backward. The best jobs humans usually got involved mops, not military strategy. Ethan's family on the struggling Mars colony needed his credits, so he took the stable position and made the most of it. He also watched. Every morning, he cleaned out pens and refilled water troughs, moving quietly through the dragon wing. The other dragons treated him with a wary disinterest given to minor background noise. This one didn't. The crimson beast tracked him with molten gold eyes, not the hungry focus of a predator sizing up prey, but something more analytical. Twice, during lunch breaks when Ethan sat outside its enclosure reading a battered book of ancient Earth poetry aloud, just to hear something familiar, he'd had the odd sensation that the dragon was actually listening. Now, that same dragon screamed as Zorrox twisted a control on the neural interface band around his head. The air vibrated with the sound, dust sifting down from the rafters. "Increase neural suppression to level 8, Zorrox commanded. A nearby Endorian assistant, all thin limbs and pale blue skin, flinched at the order but obeyed, fingers dancing over a holographic control panel. The faint hum of the suppression field surged into an angry buzz. Ethan winced. Level 8. In the manuals he'd snuck from the library, that setting was described as extreme containment. He'd found another phrase between the lines: cruelty. Dragon neural nets were incredibly sensitive. Slamming that kind of dampening field through their system was like trying to teach a horse obedience by first shattering its legs. Sir, the Endorian ventured nervously. This specimen has resisted every standard method. Perhaps another approach. Standard methods are standard because they work, Zorak snapped, not taking his eyes off the dragon. This one is merely more stubborn than most. Apply the secondary clamp. A second neural anchor ratcheted into place at the base of the dragon's skull. The creature thrashed, bellowing in unmistakable pain. On the biometric display, Ethan could see its heart rate spike dangerously high, though no one had asked his opinion. Vital signs approaching redline, master trainer, another assistant called, voice tight. Push through, Zorax barked. Its will is breaking, but instead of collapsing, the dragon coiled. Rage and raw instinct met desperation in one explosive lunge. One of the reinforced floor bolts screamed as it tore free, fragments of synth stone flying. The assistants scattered. Zorax barely got his shield fully charged before a blast of white-hot energy engulfed him, dissolving into sparks against the barrier and shoving the massive Centuran backward across the arena. Zorax recovered with frightening speed and reached for the neural disruptor holstered at his hip, a weapon designed to overload even the largest dragon's nervous system. Enough, he thundered. If this beast will not serve, it will be marked unfit for deployment and terminated. I will not waste Academy resources on feral stock. The word terminated sliced through Ethan. He'd heard rumors about unsuitable dragons. They weren't retired. They were quietly euthanized, too dangerous and too expensive to house as anything but weapons. Before he could talk himself out of it, Ethan stepped away from the shadows. Master Zorax, may I speak? The entire arena froze. Dozens of eyes, some human, some alien, one pair draconic, swung toward the skinny human in the stained gray jumpsuit. Return to your work, human, Zorax said, voice edged with irritation. You have no standing here. Ethan's mouth went dry, but he forced his feet to carry him closer. With respect, sir, I've observed this dragon every day for the last 3 weeks. I think there is another way to approach it. One of the reptilian assistants hissed a laugh. Does the prey mean to lecture predators on hunting? A few others snickered. Zorax silenced them with a single sharp gesture. Forearms folded over his broad chest as he studied Ethan with cold, measuring eyes. You have 30 seconds, he said. Use them to explain why I should not have you escorted from this facility and banned from Federation service for insubordination. Ethan swallowed hard and tried to keep his voice steady. This dragon reacts worse the more force you throw at it. Every time you raise suppression levels or add more restraints, it fights harder. But when it's calm, when I clean the pen or bring water, it watches. It's curious. I've seen that same look when I read aloud. I don't think it's just a beast, sir. I think it understands. Zorax's expression hardened. Dragons are weapons of war, boy. They're not pets to be coaxed with gentle words. Their wills must be crushed and brought under control, or we lose soldiers. Respectfully, your methods have failed with this one at least 17 times, Ethan replied, surprising himself with his own boldness. Doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result? On my world, we call that insanity. A hush fell over the arena. Even the dragon stilled, golden eyes locked on Ethan with unnerving intensity, as if the creature understood more than anyone assumed. 20 seconds, Zorax said quietly. Ethan took a breath. He thought about his family on Mars, about the credits he needed to send home, about how easily one wrong word could end everything, and then about those molten eyes and the pain echoing in that last roar. Let me try something different, he said. If I fail, you lose nothing. You'll still have your disruptor and your team. If I succeed, you gain an asset that would otherwise be destroyed. Something flickered in Zorax's gaze. Calculation, maybe, or curiosity he would never admit. And what, he asked slowly, makes a human stable hand qualified to attempt what the Federation's finest dragon trainers could not? Nothing, sir, Ethan admitted, except that I don't have preconceived ideas about how this is supposed to work. And I have nothing to lose. Silence stretched tight as a wire. Then Zorox lifted one upper hand. Clear the floor. Give the human 5 minutes. At worst, his death will provide a useful reminder about respecting protocol. The assistants exchanged uneasy looks but obeyed, backing away toward the shielded observation platform. Zorox retreated with them, neural disruptor ready. Deactivate the neural suppressors, Ethan requested. Absolutely not, Zorox snapped. Without those, it will roast you before I can blink. It can still kill me with them on, Ethan said quietly. But with them off, it might be able to think clearly enough to choose not to. Another long beat. Finally, Zorox's jaw clenched. Lower suppression to baseline. Secondary clamp, disengage. Safety grid remains, he ordered. The humming in the air dropped to a faint vibration. The secondary clamp released with a sharp click. The dragon's body shifted, tension easing from its shoulders as the invisible pressure on its nerves finally relented. It didn't relax entirely, but the wild, panicked edge faded from its movements. Ethan put the broom aside and walked forward, heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He kept his hands open and clearly visible, moving slowly across the scorched floor until he stood about 15 feet away from the dragon's massive head. The beast could end him in a heartbeat, a blast of energy, or a single swipe of its talons. "Hey," he said softly, aware that everyone, human and alien, held their breath behind the shield line. "My name's Ethan. I'm the one who brings your water and cleans your pen." The dragon's nostrils flared as it sampled his scent. Its head lowered a fraction, molten pupils contracting and expanding as it studied him. Ethan heard the faint whine of Zorox's disruptor charging behind him. "I know you're angry," Ethan went on, taking another slow step closer. "You were captured, dragged to a place you don't know, and hurt every time someone tries to force themselves into your mind. That would make anyone furious. On my world, we'd fight too. One more step." The dragon's tail twitched, but it didn't lunge. "I've seen you watching," Ethan said quietly. "Not the way a predator watches prey, but like you're listening, like you're trying to figure us out. I don't think you're just strong. I think you're smart. Maybe even someone, not something." He drew close enough to feel radiant heat rolling off the crimson scales. Each one was edged in shadowy black, overlapping like armor forged for war. He could see his own reflection in those golden eyes, small, fragile, absolutely breakable. "I'm not here to break you," Ethan whispered. "I won't demand. I won't shout. I like to work with you, but only if you choose it. Will you please consider trusting me? Just a little, long enough to see what happens." He extended his hand slowly, palm up, fingers trembling in spite of his best effort to stay calm. The arena was so quiet he could hear the faint crackle of damaged restraint bolts cooling. Zorox's finger hovered over the disruptor trigger. For a long heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the dragon exhaled a low, rumbling sound that vibrated in Ethan's bones. With deliberate care, the massive creature lowered its head until its snout almost touched Ethan's hand. Then it completed the motion, pressing warm, scaled skin gently against his palm. A collective gasp broke from the observers. Ethan's breath hitched as a strange warmth pulsed through his arm. Not physical heat, but something deeper. His vision blurred for an instant, and then a flood of impressions washed into his mind. Vast skies streaked with starlight, flocks of dragons soaring between moons, a sense of age and memory older than human civilization. "Hello, small one," a presence said inside his thoughts. It wasn't a voice exactly, but the meaning was utterly clear. "You are the first to ask instead of demand. The first to stand before me without trying to crush my will." Ethan's knees nearly buckled. You can talk," he whispered aloud, eyes wide. "Communication is possible when the pain stops," the presence replied calmly. "Your kind never noticed because you never listened. You call my people dragons. We call ourselves the Drarii. I am Veridon." Behind him, Zorox barked. "What trick is this, human?" Ethan turned slightly, still keeping his hand in place on Veridon's snout. "He has a name," Ethan said, voice shaking but clear. "Veridon. He's telepathic when you're not drowning his mind in suppression fields. He's not just a beast. He's fully aware. Impossible, Zorak snapped, though the certainty had bled out of his tone. No trainer has ever reported true telepathic exchange with a dragon. Because they ram their minds against ours like battering rams, Veridon observed dryly in Ethan's head. They try to dominate, not converse. We resist that kind of invasion. But a request for partnership, that is different. He says you've never tried talking. Ethan translated, heart pounding. You only ever try to force your way in, so they fought back. Zorax's eyes narrowed. Prove this supposed bond, he demanded. Order the dragon to perform a complex maneuver. If he obeys, I will accept that something unusual is happening. Ethan glanced at Veridon's eye. Can you show them? The great head dipped in a slight nod, scales catching the arena lights. Could you please fly one full circuit around the arena and land beside me? Ethan asked aloud. Without a moment's hesitation, Veridon flexed. For the first time since his arrival, he tested the restraints without rage, simply applying strength where it mattered. Metal screamed in protest as bolts tore free with ease that made it obvious he could have done this at any time. He spread his shadowy wings and launched upward in a rush of displaced air that nearly knocked Ethan off his feet. The dragon's massive body became a crimson streak against the training dome, executing a tight, controlled circuit that hugged the outer walls before banking gracefully back toward the center. Veridon landed so gently that the floor barely vibrated. He folded his wings and lowered his head next to Ethan again, golden eyes flicking toward the stunned trainers as if to say, was that sufficient? Zorak stared, disruptor hanging limply in one hand. That level of control without a hard neural lock, he murmured. This changes everything. Not impossible, Ethan said softly, resting his palm against Veridon's warm scales. Just a different approach. He never needed to be broken. He just needed to be asked. Behind them, whispers exploded into full-voiced chaos as word began to spread. The wild dragon no one could tame had just chosen a human stable boy who said please. By the next morning, every corridor of the academy hummed with rumor. Cadets whispered in mess lines about the human who tamed an imperial dragon with nothing but politeness, while officers traded hushed speculation in staff briefings. Ethan felt every stare as he walked, a stark contrast to the near invisibility he'd worn like armor for months. Eyes front, Cole, a passing security officer muttered, more out of habit than real reprimand. Even that was new. Yesterday, most of them didn't know his name. Today, everyone did. Veridon's presence made hiding impossible anyway. The Crimson Drarii had refused to return to his standard pen, insisting instead on accompanying Ethan. The Academy's maintenance crews had spent dawn cutting clearance into bulkheads and widening doors to allow a full-grown dragon to move through halls built for humanoids. Wherever they went together, conversations stopped and heads bowed. No one wanted to be the first to anger a newly acknowledged telepathic war beast. Stay calm, Veridon murmured in Ethan's thoughts, his mental voice a steady warmth. They are noisy, but not hostile. Most are simply confused. You can tell. Ethan sent back, still getting used to forming words from thoughts. The connection wasn't as deep as during their first touch, but even this lighter link felt as intimate as whispering secrets in a dark room. Emotion has a taste, Veridon replied. Fear, awe, anger, curiosity. They each resonate differently. This place tastes like fear and potential. They stopped outside the door to Commandant Thrax's office. The director of the academy was a severe Arcturon with violet chitinous plates instead of skin and four-faceted eyes that never seemed to blink. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. Enter, came Thrax's clipped voice. Ethan walked in, Veridon's massive head lowering to fit through the reconfigured frame. The office, normally imposing, suddenly felt cramped with a dragon curled along one wall, crimson scales catching the light. This is unprecedented, Thrax said, standing behind his sleek black desk. The plates along his jaw darkened with agitation as he paced. Yesterday, you were cataloged as a human laborer assigned to waste removal. Today, you arrive with an unbound Draconos Imperialis and a claim that the entire Dragon Corps is built on a catastrophic misunderstanding. That's what Veridon told me, sir, Ethan said carefully. He says his people call themselves the Drarii. They have language, culture, history. They're not beasts. They're civilization. Thrax's compound eyes narrowed. For 3 centuries, the Federation has relied on dragons as living weapons. Not one confirmed report of true sentience exists in our archives. Because your technology prevents real contact, Veridon projected, deliberately widening his telepathic broadcast. Thrax stiffened, eyes widening as the dragon's thoughts reached him directly for the first time. Your suppressors smother our higher functions. Your bonds override our consciousness. You never spoke with us. You only shouted over us. Thrax sank into his chair as if his legs could no longer support him. By the stars, he whispered. You're articulate. Very, Veridon replied through Ethan, adding a faint thread of wry amusement that translated perfectly. We have been trying to get your attention for generations. You've buried or reassigned any trainer who reported unusual communication. It spoiled the narrative that justified this program. That can't be true, Thrax protested weakly. You have classified files marked behavioral anomalies, don't you? Ethan asked, remembering one sanitized footnote he'd seen. Trainers reassigned after reporting hallucinations. The commandant stared at him for several long seconds, and Ethan knew the answer. If what you claim is verified, Thrax began slowly, then every dragon under Federation control is a protected sentient under the Galactic Charter Sentience Protocol. Our current program wouldn't just be flawed. It would be illegal, which is why Veridon is worried. Ethan thought, but did not say out loud. Instead, he voiced the cleaner version. He's not afraid of recognition, Ethan said. He's afraid the Federation will just invent better ways to chain a sentient species once you understand them better. The Federation is not without ethics, Thrax snapped, his pride flaring. We are not the Scourge Collective. Ethics that break when they collide with military necessity aren't really ethics, Ethan said quietly, knowing he tread on dangerous ground. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the office's air filtration unit sounded almost deafening. Finally, Thrax exhaled hard, drawing himself back into his rigid posture. This cannot leave the Academy until we understand the full implications, he decided. But nor can we pretend nothing has changed. The neural suppression in the Dragon Wing will be deactivated for observation. We'll start there. Veridon's mental presence brightened. Good, he said aloud, his voice a low rumble that vibrated the floor. My kin are suffocating under those fields. Thrax's mandibles twitched. You're giving me orders now? I am making a request, Veridon replied with dignity. A polite one. Thrax's plates flushed darker again. Fine, he said. We'll evaluate. In the meantime, Ethan Cole, you are reassigned from menial labor to provisional diplomatic liaison to the Drarii. You have unique access no one else currently does. Don't make me regret it. Ethan blinked. Diplomatic liaison? Don't let the new title go to your head, Thrax said drily. It mostly means you and your dragon will be answering a lot of questions, and if things go badly, everyone will blame you first. Comforting, Ethan muttered. Thrax's desk console chimed urgently. He checked the display and frowned. Zorox is waiting in the corridor. Send him in. The door slid open again to admit the master trainer. Zorox looked like he hadn't slept. His obsidian skin reflected the office lights in harsh angles, and tension radiated from every line of his frame. Commandant, he said formally, then inclined his head toward Veridon and Ethan. Cole, Veridon, you've reviewed the recordings? Thrax asked without preamble. 10 times, Zorox answered, and cross-checked them against historical behavioral logs. He swallowed, something like shame flickering across his hard features. I couldn't find any explanation that fits what we saw other than genuine telepathic interaction. You accept that the Drarii are sentient? Thrax pressed. I accept that we've been wrong about them, Zorox said, each word sounding as though it scraped his throat, and that our methods have caused them considerable suffering. How magnanimous, Veridon commented mentally, tone dry rather than cruel. Zorox flinched slightly, confirming he heard it too. I did not know, he said aloud. You did not want to know? Veridon replied, not without compassion. Ignorance born of convenience is still ignorance. But you are listening now. That matters. Thrax rubbed a hand over his face. This conversation is going to haunt ethics lectures for centuries, he muttered. All right, we move to stage 2. Zorox, you will accompany Ethan and Veridon to the Dragon Wing. I will join you there after amending security protocols. 15 minutes later, they stood at the threshold of the Dragon Wing. The vast chamber stretched ahead, lined with individual pens that now looked disturbingly like prison cells to Ethan. Thick force bars gleamed under the overhead lights, and the ever-present, low-level hum of neural dampeners vibrated against his teeth. As they entered, heads lifted in unison. Dozens of dragons, crimson, cobalt, emerald, obsidian, and colors Ethan didn't even have names for, turned toward Veridon and Ethan. Eyes of molten gold, glacial blue, and burnished bronze fixed on the pair. The air itself seemed to thicken. They feel the change, Veridon said. They know I am unshackled and that you are involved. Ethan's throat worked. What he had once viewed as adequately large enclosures now looked like cages built for sentient prisoners. Each pen shimmered faintly with a neural dampening field, a constant invisible pressure pressing on minds that were never meant to be muted. Can you reach them through the suppression? Ethan asked. Partially, Veridon replied. Enough for simple concepts. Enough to tell them this may be ending. From the control station above, Thrax appeared, his presence small compared to the dragons, but heavy with authority. Begin system override, he ordered Zorox. The master trainer hesitated for a fraction of a second, then started inputting commands. The hum intensified briefly, then cut off. One after another, lights on the control panels shifted from hard blue to soft green. The neural dampeners went silent. The effect was instantaneous. Dragons all along the wing shuddered, as though waking from a long, drugged sleep. Wings unfurled, stretching to full span. Some roared, the sound rolling like thunder through the chamber. Others simply stood very still, eyes brightening with emerging clarity. Then the voices hit. Ethan staggered as a rush of minds brushed against his own. Dozens of presents, each distinct, layered with curiosity, anger, grief, hope. It was like standing on a shoreline while wave after wave crashed over him. Easy, Veridon said quickly, shielding Ethan's thoughts. Gently, he broadcast to his kin. The human is not your enemy. He is the first to see us clearly. The mental roar softened into a textured murmur. One silver-scale Drarii near the front stepped forward, eyes burning like twin moons. Her mind touched Ethan's briefly, cool and sharp. So this is the human who asked, she said. This is Ethan Cole, Veridon replied aloud for the benefit of the others. The one who treated me as a person instead of a weapon. Thanks to him and a few others willing to listen, we are no longer suffocated. Thrax, high above, gripped the railing, his normally impassive face deeply shaken. Every single one of them, he whispered, all of them thinking, how many dragons are housed here? Ethan asked quietly. 42, Zorox said. And how many have been terminated as unsuitable since this academy opened? Ethan pressed. That data is restricted, Zorox replied dully. Thousands, Veridon answered in Ethan's mind, voice tinged with ancient sorrow. Those whose minds would not bend were labeled defective and destroyed. Ethan's stomach flipped. He suddenly wanted to be sick. We were not malfunctions, the silver Drarii said, her mental tone a razor of grief and fury. We refuse to be broken. For that, your Federation killed us. Zorox looked like someone had punched him. We didn't understand, he said hoarsely. You didn't want to understand, she corrected. But then she added, now you cannot pretend. Thrax cleared his throat, forcing his voice into command mode. If we are to move forward, we need to know what you want, he said, addressing the gathered Drarii. Freedom, obviously. But what does that mean in practical terms? The mental conversation among the dragons intensified, becoming an intricate tapestry of arguments and counterpoints that brushed against Ethan's awareness. After a moment, the silver Drarii stepped fully to the front of her pen, or what used to be her pen. "We want legal recognition as a sovereign, sentient species," she said. "We want control of our home system, which you renamed Draconos Prime after you occupied it. We want reparations for the lives taken and the suffering inflicted. And we want the option to serve as allies, not as property." "Those demands are substantial," Thrax said carefully. "They are the bare minimum of justice," she replied. "And they're offered as a starting point, not an ultimatum." "What about existing bonds?" Zorax asked, voice raw. "Dragons, Drarii, linked to riders throughout Federation space. Those links were built under false pretenses, yes, but some have functioned for years. Those bonds were forged in coercion," Veridon said. "They should be dissolved. If both parties then choose to rejoin as equal partners, so be it. But nothing built on slavery can be called true partnership." Thrax's console chimed suddenly with a priority alert. He checked it, and his mandibles tightened. "High Command has intercepted preliminary reports," he said grimly. "They're demanding immediate clarification. An envoy ship is already en route." "So soon?" Ethan asked. "The Dragon Core is the backbone of our defensive grid," Thrax reminded him. "Any hint of instability triggers a top-level response. I had hoped to control the timing. That option is gone." Veridon's eyes glowed brighter. "Then we meet them head-on," he said. "No more silence. No more pretending to be what we are not." Ethan glanced around at the gathered Drarii, at Zorax's conflicted face, at Thrax's tight posture. The world he'd swept quietly around the edges of for months was cracking apart right in front of him. And in the sky above the Academy, a sleek envoy ship knifed through the clouds, bringing with it the full weight of the Federation's fear. The envoy's vessel descended like a blade of polished stone, its matte hull absorbing sunlight rather than reflecting it. The air pressure shifted across the Academy grounds as the engines powered down, sending dust spiraling from the landing platform. Cadets and officers gathered around the perimeter, tension rippling through the ranks as the hatch opened with a pressurized hiss. Out stepped High Commissioner Zalax, a towering figure whose slate-gray skin gleamed like volcanic glass, and whose yellow, ember-lit eyes radiated authority sharpened into something dangerous. He took in the sight before him, the reconfigured halls, the dragons visible through the newly opened containment wing, the absence of neural suppression, and finally, Veridon standing free beside Ethan. His expression curdled into disdain. "Commandant Thrax," Zalax said without salute, "explain this disaster within 5 minutes, or I place this academy under immediate military lockdown." Thrax stepped forward, mandibles tight, but voice steady. "High Commissioner, a breakthrough occurred yesterday involving the Draconos Imperialis specimen." "Spare me your flourishes," Zalax interrupted, eyes snapping toward Ethan with cutting precision. "I was informed that a human stable boy is somehow responsible for the most disruptive event in the history of the Dragon Core. Is that correct?" Ethan felt Veridon's reassuring presence steady his thoughts. He stepped forward, pulse thundering behind his ribs. "My name is Ethan Cole, sir. And yes, I spoke to Veridon." And he spoke back. Zalax's glare hardened. "Human, you were not addressed." Before Ethan could respond, a mental voice rolled through the chamber like a warm earthquake. "I invited him." The words vibrated through Zalax's skull, and the commissioner actually recoiled, hand flying toward the neural disruptor at his hip. At the same time, 6 other Drarii stepped forward behind Veridon, their scales shimmering under the overhead lights, silver, cobalt, emerald, and black. A silent army of intelligence and forgotten history. Zalax's composure faltered. "Why are these creatures unrestrained? This violates every containment statute. We are not creatures. We are not weapons. We are the Drarii." Veridon extended his wings slightly, not a threat, but a gesture of identity long denied. The other dragons echoed the motion, a rustle like wind through titanic sails. Thrax cleared his throat sharply. "Commissioner, the evidence is irrefutable. The dragons, Drarii, possess full sentience. Our suppression technology prevented their higher thought functions from emerging. Once lifted, well, you can see the results. Zelax's ember-bright eyes widened as the telepathic resonance from the dragons coiled around the room again, undeniable and impossible to rationalize away. Still, he fought the obvious. Even if sentience is confirmed, the implications for Federation security are catastrophic. He jabbed a finger toward Veridon. The Dragon Core is our primary defense asset in 3 sectors. Our entire strategy collapses if these beings refuse compliance. Cooperation, Ethan corrected softly. Not compliance. Zelax shot him a look hot enough to scorch metal. Before he could retort, the doors slid open again, and the temperature in the room seemed to shift as though the air recognized someone older, wiser, heavier with cosmic authority. Observer Yuria of the Ascended glided into the chamber. Tall, elegant, skin glowing with shifting constellations beneath translucent blue, she commanded silence merely by existing. Every Drarii immediately lowered their heads in respect. Zelax stiffened like a struck rod. The Ascended Council was not invited, he said, though his voice had lost some of its steel. And yet, Yuria answered, her voice crystalline and airy, here I stand. When a sentient species emerges from centuries of misclassification, it falls under our observation. In mediation, she turned her star-filled gaze toward Veridon and the others. We have awaited this for a long time. Zelax's composure cracked. There has been no formal confirmation of sentience. Yuria tilted her head gently. Commissioner, I can hear their thoughts. Their minds are not merely sentient. They are ancient, deeper and more structured than your neural sensors could ever have measured. The Federation has made an error of scale. Veridon's mental presence rippled with restrained triumph. A long-ignored truth was finally being spoken out loud. We want recognition, said the silver Drarii, Seraphina. Her voice, mental and melodic, swept through the chamber. We want our home system returned. We want centuries of deaths acknowledged and compensated. And we want the choice to forge alliance with you, not bondage. Zelax bristled. Your demands are impossible. The Dragon Core cannot simply dissolve. Yuria's gentle voice cut across his protest like silk over steel. Commander, the galaxy changes whether you approve or not. You can face the new reality with dignity or be dragged into it. Zelax opened his mouth, but Veridon spoke first. We will not submit to suppression again. We will not return to captivity. And if the Federation insists, we will resist. Dozens of Drarii behind them echoed the sentiment. Telepathic waves striking the chamber like a silent storm. Ethan staggered under the weight of their collective will until Veridon softened the flow reaching him. Zelax's hands curled into fists. You threaten open rebellion? We state fact, Seraphina said. Freedom is not negotiable. Cooperation is. A tense stalemate formed in the air, one that could explode with a single misstep. Ethan felt his heartbeat drum against his chest, but he saw something Zorox saw too. Zelax's authority was cracking. Slowly, reluctantly, but undeniably. Before the tension could snap, Yuria lifted a hand. I suggest, she said calmly, a provisional compromise. The Drarii remained free of suppression. They remain within Academy grounds temporarily, while we establish diplomatic protocols. And the Federation acknowledges their provisional sentient status pending full verification, which I can expedite personally. Zelax struggled visibly. His jaw clenched so tightly the veins in his temples pulsed. I have no authority for such concessions, he said stiffly. Then obtain it, Thrax said dryly, or be remembered as the commissioner who started a preventable war. The Drarii rumbled agreement. Finally, Zelax gave a rigid nod. I will contact High Command. You will have your answer within 24 hours. Veridon's warning was soft, but carried the weight of mountains. If they choose poorly, we choose freedom, no matter the cost. Zelax departed, cloak flaring behind him like a storm cloud. Yuria remained, watching him go with an almost sympathetic look. "Your galaxy is at a turning point," she said softly. "This moment will echo for centuries." Zorax stepped forward hesitantly. "Veridon, Ethan, what you revealed, my entire career was built on false assumptions, on harm done without knowledge. Ignorance does not erase responsibility." Ethan expected Veridon to respond with anger or cold judgment. Instead, the dragon's tone carried an unexpected gentleness. "Ignorance is not malice, Zorax, but harm is still harm. If you wish to make amends, help us rebuild what was broken. Your knowledge of this program, flawed as it is, can shape the path ahead." Zorax bowed his head in genuine shame. "Then I will." Yuria smiled faintly. Balance begins with acknowledgement. As she turned to leave, her gaze lingered on Ethan. "Your species often fails to see its own strengths. You approached without preconception, without prejudice, with simple courtesy. In doing so, you unlocked a bridge countless worlds believed impossible." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I just said please, and shifted the orbit of history," Yuria replied. Hours later, as evening set over the academy, Ethan and Veridon found themselves alone on the training platform. The sky glowed amber, stars emerging above like scattered shards of polished glass. "You handled yourself well today," Veridon said in his mind. "Zalax is a stone wall, but even stone cracks under truth." "I'm just trying not to get crushed between two species," Ethan muttered. Veridon's mental presence warmed. "You stood when others would kneel. You listened when your superiors shouted. And you saw us, not as weapons, but as people. You are far braver than you think, Ethan Cole." Ethan's throat tightened. "So what now?" Thrax said tomorrow could decide everything. "Tomorrow decides the first step," Veridon corrected. "But true change takes time, and patience, and strength. We have all three." Ethan let out a long, shaky breath. "I hope High Command agrees." Veridon's golden eyes glowed softly. "If they don't, we will teach them." Before Ethan could ask what that meant, a sudden alarm blared across the academy. Crimson lights flashed along the runway. Officers sprinted across the platform. Zorax appeared at a run. Long-range sensors picked up a Scourge reconnaissance ship entering the system. "It's approaching fast." Ethan froze. "The Scourge? Here." "Likely scouting for weakness," Zorax said grimly. "If they detect instability within the dragon core, it becomes an invitation to attack," Ethan finished. Yuria materialized beside them, eyes glowing brighter. "How fortunate," she murmured, "that a demonstration of dreary human cooperation is needed at this precise moment." Ethan stared at her, realizing what she meant. "You want us to intercept the Scourge ship?" Veridon's mental rumble was eager, fierce, unafraid. "We will show them what true partnership can do." Ethan swallowed hard. "Then let's do it." Yuria nodded once. "The galaxy watches, Ethan Cole. Make it see the future." As the academy scrambled in a high alert and technicians prepared emergency launch protocols, Ethan stood beside Veridon, feeling small, terrified, and more determined than he had ever been. Tomorrow would shape empires. Tonight would prove what a single human and one dragon could do. The alarm lights splashed red across the academy's metal corridors, each pulse beating like a mechanical heart as officers hurried past Ethan and Veridon. The evening sky above Draonos IV, once calm and streaked with amber hues, now rippled with threat indicators projected by orbital sensors. The Scourge had arrived in system. The Scourge, an extinction-minded civilization of biomechanical raiders, rarely ventured this deep into Federation territory. To see even a single reconnaissance vessel approaching the Academy meant one thing: they sensed vulnerability. The rumors of instability in the Dragon Core had traveled faster than any ship. Zorax jogged toward the platform, for arms working in coordinated efficiency. The Scourge ship is maintaining reconnaissance distance, but they're closing in. They're scanning for defensive readiness. Ethan felt Veridon's calmness push through their link, a steady anchor amid panic. "What happens if they conclude we're weak?" Ethan asked. "They call in a vanguard fleet," Zorax said grimly. and then a sector invasion follows. Yuria appeared beside them, her starlit form drifting rather than stepping, like gravity bent politely for her instead of restraining her. "This moment," she said quietly, "will become the example High Command uses to define the future. Show them cooperation, and they will understand the path forward. Fail, and fear will rebuild the chains the Drarii have broken." Ethan's stomach tightened, but he stood taller. "Veridon, are we ready?" Veridon lowered his head so Ethan could touch the warm ridge between his eyes. "We are ready for anything. Fear has never guided my people, nor should it guide yours." Zorox frowned deeply. "Ethan, the kind of bond you're about to form, consensual, unfiltered, it usually takes weeks of neural conditioning and mental training. You're about to do it in minutes. Be careful. Human minds aren't meant to share space with dreary consciousness so quickly." "It's this or nothing," Ethan said. "The scourge won't wait." Yuria nodded. "And neither will history." Together, Ethan and Veridon stepped onto the launch platform. The cool evening wind combed between the massive hangar pylons, carrying the scents of heated metal and ozone. Dragons in nearby pens, now with open gates, watched with reverence, worry, and fierce hope glowing in their eyes. For a moment, Ethan simply stared up at Veridon. No matter how many times he saw him, the dragon's sheer presence was breathtaking. Crimson scales shimmered with a luminous inner heat, wings folded like night fire against the fading sky. The world around him shrank until only the dragon remained. "Let's do this," Ethan whispered. "Place your hands here," Veridon guided, lowering his head and exposing the warm hide behind his crest. "Open your mind, and trust me." Ethan touched the scales. A soft hum built between them, like the resonance of two tuning forks aligning. Then the barrier between their minds dissolved. The bond ignited. A rush of sensation flooded Ethan, wind over wings, the deep rhythmic power of a heart larger than his entire body, the crisp scent of distant mountains, echoes of ancient dreary memories. At the same time, Ethan's own emotions and thoughts wove into the connection like threads in a tapestry. Identity remained, but now it braided with another. Ethan Veridon, Veridon Ethan. Unity. The wind changed. They felt it, not with one perspective but two. Their shared awareness expanded until it filled the entire launch platform. Every shift of air, every vibration of the academy, the movements of officers running across the tarmac, even the low rumble of distant thunder beyond the horizon. Ethan gasped through Veridon's lungs. Veridon steadied him through Ethan's nerves. "We fly now," Veridon said, not as command but invitation. "Yes," Ethan answered, a thought and a feeling intertwined. They launched. The platform buckled under the force of Veridon's takeoff, but Ethan balanced the movement effortlessly through their fusion. They soared upward, slicing through the Academy's upper airspace. Buildings blurred beneath them. The horizon dropped away. The stars greeted them. Ethan felt the rush of free flight through Veridon's instincts. Every tilt of wing, every subtle muscle correction catching thermal drafts invisible to human senses. The air thinned. Temperature dropped, but the bond insulated them, sharing energy and instinct. Together, they pierced the edge of space. Below them, the Academy shrank to a speck of geometry on the planet's curve. Above them stretched the velvet void, punctured by thousands of stars. And ahead, there, the Scourge vessel. It glided through the darkness like a predatory insect forged from blackened metal and bone. Spiked protrusions jutted from its hull, glowing faintly with unnatural bioluminescence, a signature of living tech grown rather than engineered. As they approached, the vessel emitted a pulse of scanning energy that rippled through their senses. Not just mechanical scanning. Ethan felt it probe emotionally, searching for fear responses. The Scourge fed on psychological destabilization as much as tactical weakness. "They're trying to gauge readiness," Ethan said, though his lips didn't move. Thought spoke through the bond. "Then we show them strength," Veridon replied. The Scourge vessel adjusted course, targeting them with cold intent. Weapon nodules on its hull pulsed, preparing to fire. Ethan and Veridon banked to the right. Then Dove, wings folded tight against Veridon's body as they accelerated. Plasma bolts streaked past them, bright lines of destructive energy that sliced through the space where they had been moments before. Ethan had no time to think. He simply was. Awareness flowed seamlessly between him and Veridon. A twist of wing, too sharp to be human, too improvisational to be purely instinct, carried them behind the Scourge vessel. The beast machine rotated with uncanny fluidity, its segmented armor plates opening like the petals of a mechanical flower as another weapon primed. "We must blind them," Veridon said. "They track us through heat and energy signatures. Then let's give them something else to track." They reached for a memory, one Ethan barely knew he had, a trick from an old flight manual he'd skimmed in the library, meant for shuttles, not dragons. But Veridon enhanced it, magnifying its potential. In perfect synchronization, they expelled a compressed burst of thermal energy downward. The sudden flare created a false signature, so bright and chaotic that the Scourge sensors momentarily recalibrated. Blindness. Opportunity. Now, Veridon unleashed a focused beam of ionized breath. Unlike fire, it was a crystalline lance of energy that spiraled in a tight helix, striking the vessel's propulsion array. The ship jolted violently, momentum staggering. A flicker of instability ran across its hull. Direct hit. Ethan felt his joy echo through Veridon's pride. But the Scourge never fled. Even wounded, they adapted. The ship split open, literally. Its armored segments unfolded like an insect, revealing hidden limbs, exposing a second, smaller craft attached beneath. That craft detached instantly, accelerating at deadly speed. A drone. Fast. Aggressive. Razor-sharp. It streaked toward them with blades extended, aiming to carve Veridon apart. Ethan and Veridon reacted in one motion. They flipped backward in a spiral corkscrew maneuver no human or dragon could perform alone. The drone missed by centimeters, slicing a fragment of wing membrane, but causing no real harm. Pain flared, but Ethan absorbed half of it through the bond, reducing Veridon's instinctive recoil. Their combined focus sharpened. The drone circled back. "Let chase," Veridon said. "You sure?" "Yes. Draw it toward the upper atmosphere. Its wings cannot adapt to rapid density shift. Ours can." They dove toward the planet. The drone followed, its screech vibrating the air. The atmosphere thickened as they descended, and the drone's speed faltered, wings failing to correct. Its angle destabilized. Perfect. Now, Ethan thought. Together, they executed a quick vertical climb, a sudden shift no unlinked pilot could have anticipated. The drone couldn't adjust in time. It plummeted, crashing into the upper cloud layer with a flash of overloaded systems. One threat down, but the larger Scourge vessel stabilized. Its weapons glowed hotter, more focused. "We cannot disable it alone," Veridon said. "Its hull has regenerative properties. We don't need to destroy it," Ethan realized. "Just disable it long enough for recovery forces." Another idea surfaced, part Ethan's study of ship architecture, part Veridon's centuries of battlefield experience. Together, they targeted the vessel's gravitational stabilizer nodes, small ports arranged in a triangular cluster on its underside. "If we overload those, the ship will lose directional control and drift harmlessly." "We agree," Veridon said. They ascended back into space, dodging plasma fire with movements as fluid as thoughts. Ethan never imagined he could be part of something so immense. His heart thundered, but the fear sharpened into exhilaration. They closed in beneath the vessel. Now, Veridon inhaled, energy gathering deep within. Ethan lent focus, precision, intent. The beam they unleashed hit the stabilizer triangle dead center. The effect was immediate. The Scourge vessel shuddered violently. Its orientation buckled. A low, resonating screech echoed through space, a biomechanical cry, as its systems failed to compensate. The ship drifted, engines sputtering, weapons dying out one by one. Seconds later, Academy recovery craft arrived, sleek interceptors locking tractor beams onto the disabled vessel. Ethan Veridon hovered in place, breathing heavily but triumphant. "We did it," Ethan whispered into the shared mind. "We did it together," Veridon replied. When they descended back toward the academy, a massive crowd had gathered, cadets, trainers, officers, and dozens of free Drarii. Even Commandant Thrax stood at the front, posture tense and awestruck, and High Commissioner Zalax already waiting. As Veridon landed with feather-soft precision, Zalax stepped forward, expression unreadable. But something in his stance had shifted. The iron certainty was gone. A new calculation, more cautious, more impressed, had replaced it. "I witnessed the encounter from my vessel," Zalax said. "The efficiency, the precision, the symbiosis." His glowing eyes narrowed. No force bond has ever produced such performance. Ethan stepped down from Veridon's side, legs trembling with leftover adrenaline. "Because it wasn't forced," he said. "It was chosen." Zalax's voice lowered. "High Command has received my report. In light of this demonstration, and Observer Uria's confirmation of Drari's sentience, they authorize provisional diplomatic recognition." A wave of gasps swept through the onlookers. Veridon lowered his head, neither bow nor submission. "Acknowledgement," Zalax continued. "Effective immediately, all neural suppression systems across Federation facilities are to be disabled. All Drarii are to be reclassified as sentient allies under temporary diplomatic protection." Serafina and the other dragons let out resonant mental chords of relief and triumph. But Zalax added, "This alliance must prove sustainable. High Command requests further demonstrations. They want to know if such bonds can be replicated." "They can," Ethan said, "but only through consent. No more force." Zalax studied him, then gave a stiff nod. "Understood." As the crowd erupted into murmurs, Veridon turned to Ethan. "The future opens before us," he said warmly, "but the path will not be easy." "Good," Ethan replied, smiling through exhaustion. "Easy paths don't change the galaxy." "No," Veridon agreed, "but this one will." In the days following the Scourge interception, the Academy transformed into the heart of a diplomatic storm. Delegations from Federation ministries arrived in waves. Ethicists, military strategists, historians, linguists, and even economists, all scrambling to understand what the Drarii truly were. A newly re-recognized civilization with thousands of years of culture that had been ignored, smothered, or mislabeled as instinctive animal behavior. Through it all, Ethan and Veridon stood as the central figures, representatives of an entirely new paradigm. Their bond, forged freely and strengthened through mutual choice, became the model that every team of researchers dissected, questioned, and, in some cases, feared. Not all welcomed the shift. Some officers muttered about security risks. Some politicians demanded that the dragons remain under temporary containment for safety. Some argued that the Drarii were manipulating human minds. Others feared the loss of military power. The Dragon Corps had been the Federation's most powerful symbol for centuries. Accepting that the dragons were actually sovereign people meant unraveling the very foundation of its military doctrine. But then came the demonstrations. Drarii who willingly partnered with human trainees showed capabilities that stunned even their own people. Voluntary bonds, formed with trust, empathy, and open minds, produced precision flight, enhanced perception, and telepathic clarity far beyond anything forced neural clamps had ever achieved. High Command quickly learned the truth. Dominance had limited the dragons. Respect unlocked them. Within weeks, the Academy no longer resembled the facility Ethan once swept as an invisible worker. Dragons walked freely in open courtyards, conversing telepathically with scientists and cadets. Pen walls were dismantled and rebuilt into comfortable habitats. Neural tools were replaced with translators, neural resonance amplifiers, and empathic communication links. The old hierarchy cracked, then collapsed. For the first time in Federation history, equality was beginning, not as an ideal, but as a structure. Months passed, then a year. Then two, and history accelerated. A full diplomatic treaty between the Federation and the Drarii Collective was drafted, debated, adjusted, resisted, approved, celebrated, and finally enacted. The new alliance redefined both civilizations. It guaranteed the Drarii sovereignty over their home system and established mutual defense agreements, cultural exchange programs, and joint scientific initiatives. At the Academy, dragons and humans trained side by side, not as rider and mount, but as partners. Ethan and Veridon watched this transformation unfold from the center of it, overwhelmed and humbled. Ethan often wondered how any of it had begun with him, a boy who once swept floors and whispered poetry into the quiet of a dragon pen. Veridon always answered the same way. Change begins wherever someone dares to see truth. 5 years after that first encounter, the newly constructed Joint Drarii Human Academy opened on Draonos Prime. Gone were the old steel walls, the force fields, the scent of containment. Instead, sweeping natural structures harmonized with the planet's landscape. Vast caverns opened to the sky, study halls built within living crystal formations, and soaring landing terraces overlooking oceans of shimmering blue. On this day, sunlight bathed the courtyard in warm gold as Veridon landed beside Ethan, wings folding with practiced grace. The first 100 bonded pairs were graduating. They stood proudly on the central platform. 50 humans, 50 Drarii, each pair with a unique resonance, a shared presence, their bonds glowing faintly in patterns of shimmering telepathic light. These were not tools of war. These were ambassadors, explorers, scholars, defenders, creatures of two worlds choosing to walk the same path. Ethan smiled as Veridon settled beside him. "Did you ever imagine this?" Ethan asked quietly. 100 pairs forming bonds stronger than anything we even understood back then. Veridon tilted his massive head, eyes warm. "Imagine it? Yes. Expect it? No. Hope is a wind, Ethan Cole. It can guide, but not carry. We carried ourselves here." Ethan laughed softly. "I like when you pretend you're not wise." "I am only wise when compared to humans," Veridon teased. A low rumble vibrated the ground as a dozen nearby dragons chuckled telepathically. Zorrox approached across the courtyard, posture vastly different from the swaggering master trainer Ethan once knew. Age had softened him, and humility had sharpened him. He wore a ceremonial robe of deep indigo, the uniform of the Joint Academy's new partnership division. "They're ready," he said, watching the bonded pairs with unmistakable pride. These trainees, they achieved resonance levels we once believed impossible. Voluntary bonds create neural harmonics that forced bonds never accessed. "That's because forced bonds are walls," Ethan said. "These are bridges." Zorrox nodded thoughtfully. "You were right, Ethan, and I was disastrously wrong. I spent most of my career breaking what I should have been nurturing. And now," Ethan said gently, "you're building future generations." Before Zorrox could respond, a shimmering column of light materialized at the far end of the courtyard. Yuria stepped out, her star-infused form glowing under Draono's twin suns. Wherever she appeared, the air seemed to hush reverently. "You continue to impress us," Yuria said, gliding toward them with a tranquil smile. The Drarii Human Alliance is now considered one of the greatest evolutionary leaps in modern galactic history. Ethan scratched the back of his neck. "I still feel like I'm making things up as I go." "That," Yuria replied, "is the nature of pioneers. There are no maps at the edges of possibility." Veridon inclined his head. "Why have you come, observer?" "News spreads beyond the Federation," Yuria said. "Beyond this galaxy, even. Other civilizations see what you have accomplished. Cooperation where conquest once stood. Trust where fear once ruled. This alliance will matter in ways even I cannot yet fully foresee." Ethan raised a brow. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous," Yuria corrected. "Preparatory." Veridon's wings tensed. The bond between him and Ethan hummed. "The greater threat?" Ethan asked silently. "The one you and Veridon hinted at before?" Yuria's luminous eyes softened. The galaxy's long cycle bends toward change. There are ancient patterns, systems of entropy and rebirth. Star systems that wink out not from age, but from consumption. Consciousnesses that vanish as if erased. Some call it the void hunger. Some call it myth. But myths often reflect truths yet to be measured. So you're saying something big is coming? Ethan said. Not soon, Yuria assured him. But someday. And when that day arrives, species that stand alone will fall alone. Species that stand together will endure. Veridon unfurled his wings slightly. Then our alliance is not merely coincidence. It is preparation. Exactly, Urius said. Your partnership, Ethan and Veridon, is the first harmonic of a much larger symphony. Before Ethan could respond, a voice projected across the courtyard. Make way. High Commissioner Zalax approached, looking startlingly different from the man who once threatened to lock down the academy. Gone was the rigid disdain. In its place was a solemn pride. His uniform bore the sigil of the Dragon Corps' new identity, the Partnership Vanguard. He stopped before Ethan and Veridon. The Federation Council has unanimously approved the Drarii Sovereignty Act, Zalax announced. Effective immediately, all systems containing Drarii populations are recognized as independent territories within the Alliance structure. The courtyard erupted in mental and vocal applause, a chorus of joy that vibrated the air. Drarii trilled harmonic flourishes. Humans cheered. Ethan exhaled, relief washing through him. After everything, it's really happening. It is done, Zalax confirmed. The Federation now recognizes the Drarii as equal partners. And as for you, Ethan Cole, Veridon of the Drarii, you are officially named the first ambassadors of the Vanguard Alliance. Ethan blinked. Ambassadors. You changed the course of two civilizations, Zalax said. The title is merely catching up to reality. The ceremony began. Graduates stepped forward with their partners, receiving crests that shimmered with both Drarii scales and human metals, symbols of unity. Families from across the Federation watched with awe. Elders of the Drarii sang ancient harmonics, songs of liberation not heard in centuries. Ethan and Veridon stood at the center, surrounded by the legacy they helped create. As the last pair accepted their crest, Veridon lowered his massive head beside Ethan. Today is not the end of our story. It is the beginning of many others. Ethan rested a hand against Veridon's warm scales. Do you ever think about how strange it is? Everything started because I said please. Veridon chuckled, a soft tremor through the ground. Please is a powerful word. Empires rise from smaller ones. Ethan smiled. What do you think comes next? Veridon gazed toward the twin suns, wings shimmering. Discovery, partnership, challenges, and perhaps the distant shadow of something far greater. But we will face it together. Ethan nodded. Together. They lifted their heads as the Academy's sky filled with flying pairs, Drarii and humans soaring in perfect harmony, their silhouettes painted against the blazing suns. A symbol of what respect could build, a promise of what unity could defend, a reminder that the smallest act, a question, a request, a word like please, could reshape the destiny of galaxies. And so the first chapter of the Drarii Human Alliance ended, not with a battle, but with a promise. Partnership achieves what domination never will. Respect unlocks what force can never touch. And the courage to ask, politely, can change the stars.